Little girl's heartfelt cry for help. Janitor's amazing skill revealed a transformative secret. Emily sat on the worn-out linoleum floor of her elementary school, clutching a lunch ticket as she doodled in the margins with a broken pencil. Each line she drew felt like a desperate plea to the universe. See me. Hear me. The words echoed in her mind, but the gray skies outside mirrored the shadows that clung to her heart. To everyone around, she was just the girl with the greasy hair and dollar store clothes, the one whose mother worked tirelessly, weaving shifts at the diner for scraps of happiness. To the other kids, she was invisible, meant to be taunted, a living reminder of their privilege. Her classmates' laughter rang in her ears, a cacophony of jeers that ripped at her self-worth. Don't you ever get a new shirt, Emily? Why does your mom smell like food all the time? The barbs pierced deeper, teasing apart the threads of her fragile confidence. A soft, weary sigh escaped her lips as she caught a glimpse of Mr. Thompson, the janitor, whose gentle smile suggested he understood more than he let on. She didn't know why, but his presence somehow calmed her racing thoughts. One day, as she sketched the sadness that haunted her, Mr. Thompson paused beside her with a broom in hand. "What's that you've got there?" he asked, tilting his head with interest. Emily felt exposed, suddenly vulnerable. What could someone like her say? Yet, the flicker of compassion in his eyes invited her to share. She opened up about the loneliness suffocating her spirit, about being the target of ridicule. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss her pain, but rather leaned closer, intrigued by her art. He spoke of colors, of emotions that longed to escape a language she never knew existed. As the whispers of an art competition filled the hallways, hope flickered within her. Yet, shadows of doubt echoed louder than her dreams. What if I lose? What if everyone laughs at me? She wanted to shine, to prove the whispers wrong. However, the weight of her insecurities threatened to crush the flickering flame. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Emily's heart raced as Mr. Thompson shared his own struggles, revealing how art had been his salvation in dark times. His story ignited something inside her, a flicker of courage. Eagerly, she poured her emotions onto canvas, the colors finding life as she transformed her pain into a vibrant masterpiece that screamed of hope, resilience, and fear. And yet, the closer the competition approached, the tighter her chest constricted. Staring down at her almost finished painting one evening, doubt crashed over her like a heavy wave. What if they don't understand? She whispered to the empty room. Her mother's sacrifices for a better life weighed heavily in her heart. Could she risk everything and step into the spotlight? Each brushstroke felt like a gamble, each moment tainted with the fear of judgment. She stood poised at the edge of revelation, trembling with the question that echoed louder: could she dare to unveil her heart in a town that may never understand her? Emily's hands trembled as she picked up her brush again, forcing herself to mix bold hues of blue and gold. They clashed violently on the palette, yet somehow, the colors spoke to her growing resolve. The clock ticked ominously in the corner, each passing second a reminder of the looming deadline for the competition. This competition was her chance, the opportunity to turn the whispers of doubt into a solid foundation of self-acceptance, but the fear resulting from her vulnerability cast chains around her heart. Why should I even try? She muttered, her voice barely a whisper, lost in the vast silence of the classroom. The echo bounced back, mocking her uncertainties. But then she recalled Mr. Thompson's words, the promise that art was a bridge to understanding, a vessel for emotions too great to contain alone. He had poured his heart into countless canvases, and somehow, today would have to be different for her too. She was beginning to realize that maybe the worth of her piece wasn't in others' praise but in her daring to share it. With renewed vigor, Emily plunged her brush into the vivid paints, each stroke breathing life into her creation. Instead of worrying about judgment, she seized the moment to channel her isolation into the swirling galaxies of her imagination. Every brushstroke transformed into a declaration that she would not be silenced, a courageous shout against the ennui of her everyday existence. Shadows morphed into radiant sunlit landscapes of emotional expression that overflowed from her heart, emotions spilling uncontrollably as the canvas became her sanctuary. As the days dwindled to the deadline, her anxieties became a bustling storm inside her mind, battling between the desire to withdraw back into the meekness that had defined her and the raging tempest of determination that battled to break free. She could hear the taunts of her classmates every time she closed her eyes and felt their laughter pinging in her chest like shards of glass. Still, mixed with the fear was a growing sense of purpose. The need to prove herself to the world was becoming stronger than the need to hide away. One evening, pulled into solitude again, she heard a soft knock on the classroom door. It was Mr. Thompson. Sensing her distress, he approached quietly, peering at her masterpiece in progress. "It's incredible," he remarked, his voice rich with encouragement. "You've poured so much of yourself into this, Emily." She shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. But what if they don't like it? What if it's not enough? The dread of rejection clawed at her throat. Mr. Thompson smiled gently. "Art isn't about their approval, it's about your truth. It's about finding your voice. Whatever anyone else says, remember this is your journey." His words sparked a realization within her. This was no longer merely an art competition, it was a discovery of her strength and willingness to embrace her identity. The next morning, Emily made a choice fueled by the courage ignited within. She decided to stand not as the girl defined by her insecurities but as Emily the artist, ready to confront her fears. On the day of submission, as she approached the competition's location, each step echoed with both trepidation and awakening, but just before she reached the entrance, a group of her taunting classmates appeared before her, their laughter spilling out in cruel waves. And in that moment, Emily paused, a trembling resolve mixing within her. The time had come to face not only them but also the deepest shadows lurking in her heart. With her breath catching in her throat, she took a step forward, ready to confront her past. Would she finally shatter the glass walls that had kept her trapped for too long, or would fear reign, dragging her back into the shadows she yearned to escape? Emily's heart pounded as she took that step forward. The laughter of her classmates ricocheted off the walls, a cacophony that punctured her resolve. Why had she thought she could break free? The bundle of fears she had carefully hidden for so long coiled tightly around her, squeezing at her ribs. But then, within the chaos, her gaze fell upon her canvas, a patchwork of vulnerability and emotion. This was not just paint, it was the messy, complicated parts of her that she had kept locked away. "Look who thinks they're an artist now," one of her classmates slurred with a mocking grin. With every intentional dig, another thread of self-doubt unraveled. Yet, instead of retreating, the image of her masterpiece flickered in her mind. It urged her to push forward. What if they're right? A whisper inside her mind taunted. Yet, the emerging artist inside her countered, what if they're not? A surge of defiance swelled within Emily, reminiscent of the moments she had spent in the solitude of the classroom. This was more than her art, it was a manifestation of her identity, a chapter that demanded to be written. And she was not about to let anyone else define her narrative. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the intention behind her creation. Emily's posture shifted. Muscles that had previously felt heavy with despair became lighter with conviction as she stood her ground. "My name is Emily, and I'm here to share my story," she declared, her voice steadying as it emerged, like thunder from the clouds. The laughter faltered. Surprise shifted their expressions, and for the first time, she felt a thread of power pulling her forward. Disbelief flickered in their eyes, but what mattered was how she felt, a piquant brazen shift shattering the fears that had long dictated her choices. The group dispersed, stunned into silence, and she seized the moment to step past them into the building. Each step onto the polished floor echoed her fortitude, the realization dawning that her vulnerability could also be her strength. She would not seek validation through the eyes of others, instead, she would validate herself through the act of creation. Inside the gallery space, Emily was met with a rush of colorful displays and the murmur of anticipation from attendees. Artists, critics, and friends alike wandered from piece to piece, each find stimulating connections between visible art and invisible emotions. For the first time, she could feel the weight of her own existence swell as she recognized that everyone here had their own battles. She could relate to that struggle intimately. With trembling hands, Emily placed her canvas on the submission stand and stepped back to observe. The waves of golden yellows blended with deep blues echoed the complexity of her internal landscape, a stunning metaphor for the fusion of light and darkness in her life. "Are you ready to talk about it?" A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Emily turned to find a stranger peering curiously at her work, their eyes alight with understanding. This was what Mr. Thompson had meant: art could be a bridge. She could hardly begin, but there was something in their gaze that relaxed the knots in her throat. As she opened her mouth to share, the nervousness still lingered, but it was now accompanied by an unyielding flicker of hope, the hope that she could express the chaos swirling inside her. In this moment, Emily began to realize that each individual was not defined by the doubts they carried, but by the stories they dared to share. Yet, as they conversed, a haunting shadow loomed subtly in the background, a taller figure, the leader of those who taunted her. He eyed her with a predatory intensity, and even as she engaged, she felt his piercing gaze like an impending storm. Would this encounter alter the transformation she was beginning to embrace, or seal her back into the tears she had worked so hard to shed? Emily felt the chill of that gaze as she spoke with the stranger, an unsettling reminder of the mockery she had faced too many times. Her newfound self-righteousness battled the dread rising within her like bile. Each word she shared about her art felt crucial, a fragile bridge she was constructing above dark waters. "Your colors, they seem alive," the stranger mused, tilting their head and narrowing their eyes in a thoughtful squint. "It's like they pulse with emotion." A smile tugged at the corners of Emily's lips, lightly but firmly. "That's exactly what I wanted to convey," she replied, her voice steadying with every heartbeat. "It's about the struggle between light and darkness, how they coexist." As her fingers traced the outline of her painted waves, she dared to momentarily dismiss the figure still lurking in the background. It was easier to focus on the blossoming connection in front of her, but tension clung to her like a shroud. "Do you often paint this way?" the stranger asked, their curiosity evident, sending a wave of warmth through Emily. "Not until recently," she confessed. "I've spent so much time hiding my art, afraid to share it." Her heart thudded, the words hung in the air like exposed nerves. "Why hide?" they asked, genuine bewilderment clouding their tone. "Because I feared judgment. For a long time, I thought my feelings weren't valuable enough," Emily admitted, her confidence trembling at the edges. The stranger frowned. "Art has a power of its own. It speaks when we feel voiceless." Their words spun around in Emily's mind, lingering like glitter in sunlight, the kind of thought that stirred her insides. Just as the conversation deepened, she sensed movement behind her, the ominous presence now intruding on their intimate exchange. The tall figure approached with a swagger that exuded mockery, his shadow almost swallowing her small form whole. Well, if it isn't the local Picasso. What did you paint here? A fancy way of crying for help?" His voice dripped with disdain, the smile that curled on his lips repulsive and thick. Emily's heart matched the rhythm of the storm outside, threatening to unfold the power she had just discovered. That familiar coiling sensation gripped her, making her want to retreat, to shrink away from the confrontation. But she felt a flicker of the strength she had nurtured just moments before. The stranger beside her bristled, the tension palpable. "Actually," she forced out, turning to face him, "my painting reflects my journey. It represents resilience, something I've learned to reflect on honestly." The laughter in his eyes faltered for an instant. Was it surprise? Confusion? She didn't know, but it was enough for her to press forward. "You think you can dismiss me just because you picked up a brush?" "This is delusional," he countered, yet his bravado felt slight, as if he sensed the ground shifting beneath him. Emily steadied herself, digging deep for conviction. "No. It's real. And your opinion isn't going to overshadow my voice anymore." His jaw clenched at her courage, then he scoffed, masking vulnerability with a bravado built on bullying. Yet Emily found herself emboldened. Dimly, she noted that their positions had reversed. She felt taller, the ground beneath her feet much sturdier. The stranger nudged her in encouragement, a silent reminder that she was participating in a larger conversation. With this swell of defiance, Emily knew that the choice to share her art came with the risk of conflict, yet, with that conflict came growth. As she stood locked in this duel of wills, the weight of her past fears began to evaporate like morning mist under the sun. Emily's heart raced, knowing that she would face whatever backlash came next, fully aware that this moment where vulnerability met strength was only the beginning. But would the facade of her antagonist crack under her conviction, or would she have to confront the darker art of manipulation that twisted her past into a weapon? A burning question lingered, an echo calling her to delve deeper into her resolve. Would she be capable of standing firm in her truth, or would she falter under the weight of his disdain? The atmosphere thickened, almost palpable, as Emily stood her ground, the faint brush of courage igniting in her chest. The stranger's presence beside her felt like a lifeline, anchoring her to the moment, pushing her to confront the storm brewing within. The laughter from her antagonist hung in the air, but it felt less like an attack and more like an opportunity, a door she had a choice to open. Art isn't a delusion, it's a reflection of all that we experience, including the pain, she shot back, the words tumbling from her like brush strokes on canvas. Each pulse of her voice was a brimming color, vibrant and real. If you think painting can't hold real power, maybe you need to take a closer look. This isn't just a canvas. It's me. Raw and exposed. His smirk faltered again, revealing a flicker of uncertainty before he masked it with a disdainful sneer. Emily's heart raced. The vulnerability she had shared was now tethered to a sense of assertiveness she hadn't known she possessed. It startled her, like hitting a high note she never thought she could reach. Tell me, do you even create anything of value? He challenged, the question echoing in her mind, taking root. She felt the urge to parry, but she paused, realizing the depth of that comment. The implication struck at her self-worth, digging deep. Did she need validation from someone who barely knew her? For a heartbeat, she felt the chill of doubt creeping back in, but she squashed it. Her focus shifted back to the vivid colors swirling in her mind, her personal journey rendered in bold strokes on canvas. Value isn't defined by your standards, she replied, her voice low but firm, each syllable steeped in a newfound clarity. It's birthed from the process of creating, from the struggle and triumph I experience. You may laugh, but that's your limitation, not mine. Emily felt the supportive gaze of the stranger beside her, an unexpected ally in this moment of confrontation. It reassured her. The balance shifted, and where once stood a bully masked by bravado, now there loomed a small, self-doubting man, trapped behind his own defenses. This realization lit up a corner of her mind as if flickers of light illuminated the shadows of haunting memories. With rapid breaths, Emily focused on the strength in her core. She had spent so long caught in a cycle of inadequacy, accepting the remnants of harsh judgment as truths. But here, at this crossroads, she felt an unmistakable resolve swell within her. I have every right to express myself, and it matters. My art matters. As she spoke, the anticipation in the crowd morphed from amusement to concern. Silent whispers began to ripple across the faces surrounding them. The shift in perception intensified the fire within, compelling her to push harder. She realized this wasn't just a confrontation with him, it was a confrontation with all the voices of doubt that had once held her captive. In that moment, she wasn't just protecting her artwork, she was dismantling the chains of her past. The thought consumed her, fueled by the desire for transformation not just externally, but deeply within. Every drop of uncertainty she poured out only added to her conviction. Art is how I reclaim my voice, she declared louder, each word a step toward liberation. The energy shifted palpably, the antagonistic figure's eyes flared with resentment, his posture slumping slightly. She could see the cracks. And just like that, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, those onlookers had begun to root for her. Leaving her heart exposed, she locked eyes with her opponent one final time, determined to etch this moment into her evolving sense of self. Watch me as I rise, she said, daring him to respond. His mouth opened, ready for scorn, but instead of retorting, he turned, retreating into the murmur of the crowd, trapped in the very indifference he had wielded against her. Emily felt the weight of victory settle through her limbs, expansive and liberating. Would this moment mark the dawn of her artistic truth? Or was the bittersweet taste of vindication just a prelude to more battles ahead? The echo of her awakening pulsed in her fingertips, compelling her to paint even greater apparitions of truth and resilience. But as the crowd began to dissolve and the energy shifted again, she couldn't shake the small voice within. What would it take to truly step into her power? Would confronting her fears lead to a more profound revelation, one that could reshape her very identity? She needed to find out. Emily stood in the fading light, her heart hammering against her ribcage like a drum, each beat an echo of her earlier confrontation. She watched the crowd thin, feelings of triumph wrapped tightly around uncertainty. The adrenaline slowly ebbed, leaving behind a tingling awareness of the boundaries she had dared to breach. A ripple of change stirred within her, but doubt still loomed like a specter on the edge of her consciousness. The stranger who had stood beside her, this unexpected ally, moved closer. His gaze held a blend of admiration and curiosity. "You were incredible," he said, the sincerity in his voice resonating like a note that lingered long after the orchestra has finished. Emily felt her cheeks flush slightly. Praise was still a foreign blessing she hadn't completely learned to accept without scrutiny. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, humbled by the kindness she hadn't anticipated. With a tentative smile, he introduced himself as Marcus. They exchanged pleasantries, but Emily's thoughts swirled like paint on her palette. Who was he, really? She found herself captivated not just by his words, but by the calm aura that surrounded him, an energy that felt contagious, compelling her to explore the depths of her aspirations. "Why do you paint?" Marcus asked, his earnestness pulling her deeper into reflection. "What drives you?" The question pricked at the layers she had begun peeling away. Emily considered her canvas, the emotions woven into every stroke. "I guess it's my way of processing everything. It's where I find freedom," she replied, her voice steadier with each word. He nodded, as if tracing the ink in her veins. "And how can you turn this moment into something more?" Related questions sparked within her, igniting possibilities. Emily studied him, drawn to the hint of wisdom entwined with his youth. "What do you mean?" "You're carrying something incredible," he encouraged, gesturing toward the remnants of the crowd. "It's the spark of change. Don't let it fizzle out." The throbbing in Emily's heart intensified. Her courage had begun to manifest, transforming vulnerability into a strength she had yearned for. But could she harness that? The remnants of doubt crept in, causing her breath to falter. What if the confrontation with her antagonist had just been an illusion, an ephemeral victory that wouldn't survive the scrutiny of reality? With a renewed determination, she replied, "Hit me with ideas. How can I turn this into my next step?" Marcus smiled, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Why not share your story through your art? Host an exhibition or create a series of pieces inspired by moments like today, the struggles, the triumphs." As he spoke, images whirlwind through her mind, canvases painted with raw emotion, stories untold on display for the world to see. Every slice of fear, every brush of resilience, all laid bare for anyone willing to witness. But what if they don't understand? Or worse, what if I fail? She voiced, the familiar tendrils of fear weaving back in. Or what if they do? Marcus countered, piercing through her self-imposed limitations. "You'll never know unless you take that leap." His challenge struck a chord deep within her, reverberating off the walls of her insecurities. Perhaps failure wasn't the end of her journey, but simply a part of it, a brushstroke in a broader narrative that only she could tell. The possibilities unfurled before her, fascinating and daunting. Could she really take that leap? The flicker of excitement began to drown out the resistance whispering her insecurities, offering a glimpse of transformative power. "I need to sketch this out," Emily murmured, recalling her hurried notepad and the vibrant hues lurking in her mind, yearning for attention. "Absolutely," he encouraged, his smile unwavering. "Just remember, the key to your power is ownership of your story." As they parted ways, Emily's heart pulsed with possibility. Every step felt like a brushstroke painting the roadmap of her evolution. Standing on the precipice of her potential, she realized that the confrontation had merely been a stepping stone, an entry into a more significant journey. What awaited her with the unveiling of her art? Would she find acceptance? Redemption? The deeper truth surrounding her existence rested just beyond her grasp, shrouded in the avenues of her imagination. One thing was certain, the canvas wouldn't remain blank for long. With renewed purpose, she set off, each stride firmer than the last. But as night fell and uncertainty loomed, a new question echoed in her mind. Could she truly embrace the stories hidden in her heart, and would they resonate with others just as deeply as they resonated with her? The taste of anticipation lingered as Emily stepped into her studio the following morning, the air thick with potential. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden rays over her scattered sketches and unfinished canvases. It was time to channel the courage Marcus had ignited within her. She sat at her easel, almost reverently. The blank canvas before her was daunting yet promising, a silent invitation to confront her fears and her truth. Minutes turned into hours as colors mixed and emotions flowed, each brushstroke becoming a stepping stone in her artistic journey. Memories of yesterday's events danced in her mind, driving her to encapsulate every nuance of sorrow and triumph that intertwined with her identity. However, with each stroke, doubt began to creep in, wrapping itself around her thoughts. What if her work was unworthy? What if her story didn't resonate? The uncertainty gnawed at her, each question dulling the vibrancy of her palette. Taking a deep breath, Emily closed her eyes, grounding herself in the thread of her narrative. Process it, she reminded herself, recalling her earlier words to Marcus. Art was her outlet, her voice unraveling the knots of self-doubt. It was not simply about how others would perceive her work. It was about the freedom that came from expression. As she moved forward, Emily found herself completely absorbed in her creation. Waves of emotion pushed and pulled her paintbrush like the tide. Each layer built upon vulnerabilities she had long buried, revealing the raw essence of who she was. Here, in the sanctity of her studio, she was no longer just an artist. She was a storyteller, a warrior confronting an internal battlefield. The afternoon slipped away, and just as she began feeling that she had finally captured the spirit of her struggle, her phone buzzed an alert from social media. Her heart sank slightly. It was as if she could feel the weight of expectation pressing down once more. With trembling fingers, she opened the app to find messages from acquaintances commenting on her previous confrontation. Some were supportive, others critical. One particular comment caught her eye, a stinging remark from someone she thought she knew well. "Looks like you've lost it, girl. Just because you yelled doesn't mean you've made a point." The words hit her like a slap. The pulse of confidence she had been cultivating now felt fragile, shaking under the weight of judgment. She clenched her jaw, the roar of her insecurities rising once more. Silence enveloped her studio, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, anticipating her next move. She could retreat, hide away in shadows of self-criticism, or she could stand her ground and channel this pain into her work. The ringing challenge from Marcus echoed in her mind. This was her story to tell, not anyone else's to tarnish. Could she transform this negativity into something powerful? Fueled by determination, Emily began to paint frantically, layering dark blues and striking reds, using the anguish as a catalyst for creation. The colors seemed to leap off the canvas, infused with the fire of her emotions. Instead of setting herself up for overthinking, she let the art spill out freely, unfiltered and raw. Hours passed in this fervor until the piece stood before her, a visceral testament to her journey. Every stroke now represented not just her struggles but also her resilience. She felt alive, truly alive. The art had transformed her pain into power. As she finished, the weight of trepidation lifted, and a sense of clarity washed over her. This was not just a reflection of her soul, it was an invitation for others to witness her growth, her vulnerabilities, and her strength. She stood back, breathing heavily, staring at the art. It was time to step into the world again, embrace the inevitability of critique, and challenge herself to share her creation. The notion was terrifying, yet exhilarating. In this turn of events, something extraordinary bristled beneath the surface. She was ready to heal not just herself but perhaps others. Through her art. And as she contemplated the exhibition that loomed ahead, thoughts of how to share this with the world circled her mind. What stories would she weave around her pieces? Could she face the very person who had critiqued her harshly? As she considered these questions, she felt her heart racing again, sensing that she was on the verge of something transformative. The moment shared with Marcus sparked an inner transformation she hadn't anticipated, yet it left a lingering question. Would this journey finally lead her to confront those who threatened her narrative? Emily stood before her finished painting, her breath catching at the vibrant clash of colors dancing on the canvas, a tumultuous reflection of her struggles and newfound resolve. Yet with each passing moment, the weight of exposure loomed larger in her psyche. Would her work stand up to scrutiny, or would it crumble beneath the burden of others' judgments? The harsh comment that had pierced her confidence echoed in her mind. She turned away from the canvas, pacing the studio as she sought to quiet her buzzing thoughts. This confrontation with her own voice was no longer merely about art, it was an assertion of her identity. Yet, how could she expect anyone else to understand this complicated narrative if she herself was still unraveling it? She grabbed her sketchpad and notepad, flipping through pages filled with thoughts swirled in ink and colors. The practical side of her mind recognized a potential strategy, documenting her emotional evolution through writing. Maybe if she articulated her artistic process, she could draw others into her narrative, making it accessible and relatable. This was not just about her triumph over emotional turmoil. This was a bridge for conversations that could resonate with someone else's hurt. She scribbled furiously, outlining key moments that led to the deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. Each word shed light on those shadowy parts of her journey. What if she shared the layers of her vulnerabilities, how they colored her work and shaped her perspective? Could that spark understanding, even empathy? The idea glimmered like a distant star, faint but persistent. Feeling a surge of enthusiasm, Emily decided it was time to tap into the community around her. Was there a nearby artist group or collective where she could share her work and ideas? This thought sent a rush of energy through her. It felt like a challenge and a lifeline all at once. Perhaps facing criticism in a supportive environment could fortify her resolve instead of breaking it down. As she began to search online, another flurry of words entered her mind. This was about creating a dialogue, inviting others, even her critics, to join her in an exploration of self and art. She would not only showcase her pieces but offer an insight into how those pieces emerged, born from pain and perseverance. The connection between artist and viewer could deepen, transforming mere observation into shared experience. With new determination, Emily drafted a proposal for a small local gallery, a modest space she had long admired but felt, until now, was beyond her reach. She imagined her paintings on the walls, each accompanied by snippets of her story, and realized she was beginning to shape the narrative she wanted to tell. But that also reminded her of the harsh words she had received. How could she stand up to that negativity and not allow it to control her story? As her prospect took form, clarity also brought an unexpected tension. The risk of confronting the critics gnawed at her. What if the person who had hurt her feelings showed up? Faced with that possibility, she understood the journey was not just external, it would also demand immense internal resilience. The very act of presenting her work would test the courage she had begun to cultivate. Driven by both apprehension and hope, Emily carefully crafted her proposal, pouring her spirit into every line. This undertaking was as much a revelation about her artistic voice as it was an invitation for audience interaction. It encapsulated not just her evolution, but the collective experiences they could uncover together. As she pressed send on her email, she felt lightheaded, the anticipation palpable in the air. Each moment spent on her art was building to something greater than a simple exhibition. It was a call to empathy, a chance to confront her critiques not only through paint and canvas but in the very act of sharing her journey. The moment had arrived for her to confront the shadows and break the silence that had clouded her life. With a mix of excitement and dread, she sensed her greatest trial was not merely that of artistic expression, but of standing firm in her identity against an onslaught of judgment. As she stared out the window, imagining the responses she might receive, an unsettling thought crossed her mind. What would she do if someone from her past, the one who had first ignited her insecurities, attended? Could she face them and hold her ground? That question lingered, wrapping around her determination like a vine ready to test the very foundations of her growth. The days leading up to the exhibition were a whirlwind of emotion for Emily. Each morning, she would awaken with the anticipation of the event layered with anxiety, her mind racing through both exhilarating possibilities and troubling doubts. Could she truly embrace her vulnerabilities in front of an audience? The thought sharpened her focus. She had made a promise to herself. With the opening night drawing closer, Emily transformed her studio into a sanctuary of creativity and reflection. She immersed herself in painting, allowing colors to spill freely, echoing the tumult of her emotions. Each stroke of the brush ignited questions, driving her deeper within her psyche. Was her artistic endeavor an act of defiance against her detractors or a way to seek validation through raw honesty? Perhaps neither and yet both. One afternoon, as she stood before a blank canvas, she had a revelation. Art was not merely a reflection of personal turmoil, it was a potent means of communication, a universal language. Her past had colored her work, yes, but that very personal history could act as a catalyst for creating connections with others. With this clarity, she longed to extend an olive branch through her brush, inviting the audience to peek behind her walls and see the world through her eyes. Emily sat down with her sketchpad again, this time crafting not just anecdotes but probing questions meant to spark dialogue. How did self-doubt intertwine with creative expression? What if the beauty and vulnerability resonated more than perfection? She envisioned guiding viewers through her artistic journey with words that mirrored her paintings, each complementing the other in a dance of self-revelation. As the exhibition day approached, the tension in her gut coiled like a spring. She wanted to project confidence, yet a part of her wanted to shrink, hiding behind the very colors she had come to love. Her mind revisited the critics' words that had struck a nerve before. Embracing their judgment felt like standing naked before a storm. One evening, while putting the finishing touches on her pieces, Emily remembered the voice of her childhood art teacher, a woman who had once, with sparkling eyes, told her that art was a mirror reflecting both the artist's heart and soul. In that moment, she resolved to embrace this philosophy. She didn't need to seek approval, she needed to express truth. The day of the exhibition dawned, bright and crisp, yet her heart thumped unevenly as she arrived. The gallery was alive with chatter, the walls adorned with her creations. Each piece radiated a powerful energy that filled the air, like a collective heartbeat. Could she really present her truth amidst this buzz? As the crowd began to gather, Emily's eyes swept the familiar faces, landing on a figure she had dreaded encountering, the source of her earlier insecurities, now thawed into a semblance of new awareness. Her breath hitched. This was the moment she had both feared and longed for. With a mix of adrenaline and trepidation, she stepped forward, heart racing, in search of the courage that had risen within her through this journey. The possibility of exposing herself was daunting, yet the weight of silence could no longer burden her. She realized that confronting her past was not merely about standing firm against judgment, it was about reclaiming her narrative, about transforming the echoes of the past into a new song of resilience. As she opened her mouth to speak, a sudden hush fell over the crowd, and all eyes turned to her. This was it. The moment had arrived, not just for her to share her work but to reveal the spirit that guided her through her darkest hours. Would she find the words to articulate her journey? And if she did, would the answer be captivating enough to transcend her fears? With every ounce of determination, Emily prepared to embrace not just the audience, but the entirety of her story, raw, unfiltered, and undeniably her own. Emily stood in the gallery, each heartbeat resonating with the vibrant hues of her artwork. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, their eyes inquisitive and expectant. Moments felt tangible, charged with possibilities as she fixed her gaze on the canvas displaying her innermost struggles and triumphs. Every brushstroke was a testament to her arduous journey from invisibility to self-acceptance. Stepping to the center of the room, she felt a palpable energy shift. In that instant, the fear that had coiled tightly around her heart began to ebb. The shadows of her past, the taunts of her classmates, made their presence known, but instead of succumbing to anxiety, she summoned the courage that had propelled her thus far. "Thank you all for being here today," Emily began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "This exhibition is not just a showcase of my art, it's an invitation to share a deeply personal narrative filled with fear, resilience, and ultimately, transformation." As she spoke, she took solace in the weight of her newfound resolve. The initial tremor in her voice settled into a steady rhythm as she recounted the challenges she faced, not only from others but within herself. She told them of the identity she had forged amidst neglect and ridicule, her journey marked by the vibrant collisions of color that danced on her canvas, echoing her internal struggles. With every anecdote, Emily revealed the complexities of her art's creation, the late nights spent pouring her pain onto the canvas and the fostering guidance of Mr. Thompson, the janitor who had believed in her when no one else did. The audience shifted in response, nodding along as connections sparked in the space between them. This wasn't just her narrative, this was a collective experience that transcended her individual existence. Then, as her gaze wandered, she settled on the face of her former classmate, the very one whose jeers once silenced her. What she once viewed as a harbinger of doubt now appeared to her as a snapshot of her past insecurities, a face that held no power over her present. The realization surged through her, igniting a profound sense of liberation. Art is about vulnerability, she continued, her spirit buoyed. It's about confronting what lies hidden beneath the surface. Each piece here encapsulates not just my turmoil, but the profound beauty of sharing one's truth. As she spoke, the response from the audience began to swell. Whispers of admiration fluttered through the gallery. She could feel their recognition and external validation of her growth and a reflection of her hard work. Then, a soft voice broke through the thrumming atmosphere. It takes incredible strength to be so open. It was the stranger from the exhibition, now a familiar ally. His encouragement wrapped around her like a warm embrace, further fueling her courage. Taking a deep breath, Emily shifted her focus back to her painting. This piece represents the fears I've had about not being enough, the doubts that have haunted me. The room descended into a reflective silence as they absorbed each word. Each layer of emotion hung raw and exposed on the walls. Yet in this canvas lies not just sorrow but hope. Hope that we can illuminate our darkness, transform our struggles into strength, and embrace the complexity of who we truly are. She felt empowered, a wave of confidence surging within her. Emily had conquered the fears that threatened to define her. She had demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity, and as she entwined her narrative with the vibrant colors of her artwork, the audience recognized her transformation. At that moment, a shift occurred. She felt not just like an artist but an architect of her own identity. One by one, attendees approached her canvas, questions bubbling to the surface that allowed dialogues to emerge, transforming a singular experience into a shared journey of exploration and understanding. Emily took a step back, standing amidst the crowd. They were not only spectators but engaged participants in a tapestry woven from her insecurities, a testament to the power of art to bridge divides and connect hearts. The weight of approval felt meaningless compared to the affirmations exchanged between her and the audience. The guy who had once mocked her was now muted, merely an echo of the past dissolving into non-existence. Instead, she was surrounded by individuals ready to uplift one another, share their stories, and embark on the same journey of personal rediscovery. With a newfound sense of accomplishment, Emily relished in the moment, utterly satisfied with who she had become. The fear that once loomed large over her now felt like a whisper, eclipsed by the unwavering brightness of her truth. This was the culmination of her efforts, the ultimate validation of her worth. She had achieved a transformation that resonated not only within herself but spread outward into the collective experience of art. The whispers of her insecurities were finally silent. As she concluded her narrative, Emily sighed with fulfillment, the burden of others' opinions lifting. She was no longer just Emily the invisible girl. She had transformed into Emily, the artist, a creator armed with the truth of her journey and a conviction that would carry her forward into the realms of boundless opportunity. Now, with this newfound confidence, she envisioned a future where her creations continued to serve as lighthouses for those lost in their own storms, and where the joy of expression turned into a fierce advocacy for authenticity. This was her moment, her metamorphosis of hope and strength. With conviction clanging like a bell, she felt the urge to inspire others. If you believe in the power of personal stories and transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support and join us as we explore even more exclusive emotional journeys. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm that promotes our community of personal growth. And comment below with your reactions and theories about this journey. Let us create a conversation about overcoming adversity together.